A lot of buzz on the White House Kremlin hotline, or should I say the Delaware Kremlin hotline. President Biden just wrapped up a phone call with President Putin. The two leaders spoke for about 50 minutes as thousands of Russian troops loom on Ukraine's border. Joining me now is Rebeccah Heinrichs, national security analyst and a Hudson Institute senior fellow. Rebeccah, thanks for joining me. We don't have a readout on this phone call yet, but what do you think is taking place between these two leaders on this call?
Well, I think President Biden is trying to convince Putin that the costs would not be worth what the Russians are considering, which is another invasion against Ukraine. Now, this is really late in the game because everything that's happened over the last year of the Biden presidency has signaled to Putin that the United States doesn't have a lot of resolve and isn't willing to do what is necessary to defend the Ukrainians, isn't willing to actually provide the military equipment that the Ukrainians are asking for. Of course, they had this, the Biden administration waived sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which the Ukrainians objected to, the Russians, which strengthens the Russians. So we're really late in the game. The Biden administration is trying to now, at this point, convince the Russians that all of these signals are wrong and it really would be a really big mistake. We'll see now if that actually will work and that the Russians will back down. I remain skeptical, but of course I hope that with NATO will come along and demonstrate some resolve and communicate that the United States with NATO is going to punish Putin sufficiently so that they don't act aggressively against Ukraine.
Rebeccah, I think you make a good point because I think that if you're the rest of the world, you look at what America has done in regard to international crises, and we haven't appeared very strong. And so this is a make it or break it point for President Biden. If he looks weak here, then I think really you look at Russia and also then China and the rest of the world and our allies look at this administration and see just American weakness, right? So the president really has to show strength in this meeting with Putin.
He does, and he has to communicate that he's serious. It's not just enough to just say, if you do all these things, we're going to do this. Putin has to believe him. Now, there's some things, Sean, that has happened in the last couple of weeks that are very concerning with the Russians. You know, the Russians launched that satellite, the anti-satellite system that destroyed all that debris, sent all that debris into outer space with our astronauts up there. Another thing that was concerning was that the Russian hockey team dressed in old throwback Soviet gear. The Russians court shut down a memorial that memorialized Stalin's abuses against the people. The Russians shut that down. So the Russians have had some very concerning, defenses of the former Soviet past while they're threatening to invade Ukraine again. And so it's really a shame that the Biden administration has tried to capitulate to the Russians rather than demonstrate strict resolve and to show Putin that this revanchism isn't going to work.
So, Rebeccah, to that point, I want to do a little rewind to 2005 and show you what Putin had to say about the old former Soviet Union empire. Take a listen.
Above all, we should acknowledge that the collapse of Soviet Union was a major geopolitical disaster of the century. As for the Russian nation, it became a genuine drama. Tens of millions of our co-citizens and compatriots found themselves outside Russian territory. Moreover, the epidemic of disintegration infected Russia itself.
It almost seems like he wants to rebuild the old Soviet Union, the Russian Empire. That's kind of frightening.
Bingo. You know, Vladimir Putin is a former KGB officer. He has not forgotten the past. He hasn't accepted the past. And so he's always looking for soft spots in the Western resolve, in what the West is willing to do to defend itself. And so now he's making these demands that are completely unacceptable towards the United States and NATO, saying that Ukraine can never be a part of the NATO bloc. Now, that's not something that NATO can promise, that Ukraine might one day eventually be part of the NATO alliance. So, you know, Vladimir Putin, he's really stoking these Soviet nationalist feelings inside Russia while acting aggressively and provocatively. And it's concerning that this is going on while repression is going on inside Russia and inside China, where China is stoking these, Chinese Communist Party sentiments and collaborating increasingly with the Russian Federation against the United States and our interests.
I don't have much time, but I just want a quick response to this. So the real tool that Biden has is sanctions on Russia. What would be the most powerful and threatening sanctions that he could threaten in this conversation that might make Putin go, whoa, we don't want that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, you want to threaten sanctions against individual Russian leaders, again, some kind of banking sanctions, something like that. But at this point, probably the biggest threat would be actually not completing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. But that's going to be up to Germany. And Biden has already green-lighted that. So it's really going to be up to Germany. The United States has acquiesced too much and have ceded our authority and leadership to other countries. And I'm not hopeful, but let's hope that NATO allies together can convince the Russians not to do this.
We can only hope, Rebecca. Thank you for your time and insight. I appreciate it.